Overall, action research helps you improve your teaching practices by helping you identify real world problems in your classroom, helping you become an expert in an area that is important to your students and their learning, and it helps you become a more reflective teacher on your own teaching practices. Hello. In this video, we are going to talk about what aspects of action research are likely to benefit your students in your classroom. One aspect that your students will find beneficial about your action research projects is that you will become an expert in an area that you might not have had a lot of information about previously. For example, when I was teaching preschool at a private international school, I noticed that there was not a strong community connection between families and students, and this was impacting student success in the classroom. I then posed the question, how could I improve connections between parents and the classroom community? I did some research on best practices in current literature, and I found that holding parent informational workshops would be one beneficial way in which parents could learn more about the preschool program and more about how they could help their students with emergent literacy skills at home. I then held monthly workshops for parents, and we talked about current issues in the preschool classroom and what they could do at home to benefit their students. After the workshop series was over, I conducted a survey to ask the parents what they felt was most beneficial about the workshop series. This survey allowed me to reflect on what was best practices in the classroom and what helped create a better classroom community for my parents and my students. This led me to become an expert in teaching workshops for parents and building a classroom community, which ultimately saw benefits for my students because their parents were more involved in the classroom community, which helped improve results on students' achievement overall. Another benefit your students will see is that you will be working with an area that is relevant to their learning. Action research is mostly conducted by looking at problems in your classroom that need real world solutions. Action research allows professionals and educators to look more closely at what the issues are in the classroom and how to solve those issues by using current best practices and literature research. It also helps you create new knowledge and new understandings of what the problems are in your classroom and how best to address them. These results directly benefit your students because you are learning about new ways in which you can help your students learn and achieve goals. Lastly, another aspect that will benefit your students in the classroom is that you will be learning and trying out new teaching practices that will ultimately impact the teaching and learning that occurs in your classroom. Your students will get to try out new techniques, new methods, and new ways of exploring topics that you might not have previously done in the classroom before. For example, I teach currently in a Head Start classroom, and there's a big focus on STEAM in education right now. We received a STEAM Lego kit from the Office of Early Childhood, and that is not something that we had previously used in our classroom before. We then decided to implement an action inquiry cycle in which we asked the students questions about how we could build something before we started learning with the materials. We posed the question, how could we build our own playground out of these Lego materials? By posing this question, the students were able then to ask their own questions and come up with their own ideas. This deepened their learning, and it also helped them plan what they were going to do before they executed their ideas. By implementing an action inquiry cycle, your students deepen their understanding of a topic and they learn new ways to think and explore with new materials. Overall, practicing action research in your classroom has many benefits for your students and their learning. It helps you become an expert in an area that you might not have known a lot about previously. It helps you solve real world problems that are relevant to your students and their learning. It could help engage your community in learning as well. And it also helps your students learn new methods and new ways of exploring in ways that they hadn't previously worked with before. Overall, action research has many benefits for the students in your classroom and is a worthwhile pursuit.
Hi, I just wanted to start by sharing a little bit of background for who I am, which I think may provide some context for this action research project. So I'm Dr. Regan Murnan, and I am an assistant professor at Wichita State University. I was a longtime middle school special education teacher in a suburban school district in Northern Virginia. I also regularly did ESY and summer school at the elementary level. The population of students that I was licensed to teach were students who accessed the general curriculum. So the same curriculum that you and I encountered is the same curriculum that the students I was teaching encountered, only they met the criteria to receive special education services. At 18 years old, I decided I wanted to be a special education teacher. I'm not sure why I decided that. I had no background or any personal experiences that would have compelled me to want to be a special ed teacher. And to be honest, I had no idea what I was getting into. It was just something that was placed in my heart and a call that I felt overwhelmingly compelled to answer. So without knowing anything, I dove straight in. I finished my bachelor's in 3.5 years, earned my master's shortly after that. And then at the ripe age of 22, I landed my first teaching gig on a provisional license. In fact, I walked into my classroom for the first time without having ever stepped foot in a classroom of my own, other than when I was a student. So kind of stepping into the structure of the school day, I had experienced a bit of kind of a mismatch between the things that I had learned during my studies and what the reality of teaching was. And one of the biggest differences was just the very essence of what special education was. It was made very clear in my teacher preparation program that special education was a service and not a place. Yet the special education services that were being delivered in the school that I was at were often in a separate place. So we have sort of this mismatch between what special education is and where it is for these students in particular. And that was something that I had chewed on for quite some time. Then as my career kind of progressed, I noticed this huge push for inclusion. So now students who were accessing this same curriculum, but in different classrooms, were now being mainstreamed and pushed into general education classes with other students who didn't have any sort of disability determination. And as I did some research and dug a little deeper into this, I noticed that there were sort of two schools of thought. On one end of the spectrum, there's this thought for full inclusion. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's this thought of kind of separation. And in fact, I'm going to share with you this quote that really struck me. And it's from these two ladies, Zygmunt and Clue, and they are teacher educators. And they said, special education remains a promise unfulfilled. In the embrace of normalization and inclusion, legislatures, school leaders, and parents have focused on ensuring equal educational opportunities. But the promise of special education was unequal opportunities, special opportunities, different and more appropriate opportunities, tailored opportunities, individual opportunities. And this quote really sparked some questions in my mind that I thought may be worth researching. And some of these questions that I had asked kind of centered on the students' voices. What I had come to realize in all the research that I did is that the students' voices weren't really captured. So are these students desiring these special opportunities or these tailored opportunities? And if so, or if not, are there certain characteristics or certain variables that could predict which students may prefer these more tailored opportunities versus those who want the equal opportunities? And then also, do students feel more called out or more different in an inclusion classroom versus a classroom where they're surrounded by other students with exceptionalities? And what I noticed was we would often say, well, we don't want to pull them out. We don't want them to feel different. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But then I would wonder, well, then do they feel more different when they're included? So again, these students' voices aren't really being captured. And so drum roll, please. This is where action research can kind of help to answer these questions. And the world is kind of your oyster for the research designs that can help answer any question that you might have. We can ask a bunch of different questions and answer them in a bunch of different ways with a bunch of different approaches, different perspectives, and different analyses. We can answer these questions qualitatively by interviewing students and just simply asking them. We can triangulate these results by also including other stakeholders like teachers and parents and caregivers and asking about their perceptions of inclusion. We can answer these questions quantitatively. We can provide surveys on self-efficacy and self-confidence. And we can kind of see, are there differences in self-efficacy and self-confidence for students who are included or more mainstreamed versus those who spend the majority of their day in a more self-contained setting or in a setting with only other peers who have an exceptionality. And then what's super cool is that we can kind of use these results to help inform our own teaching kind of on a more micro level. So how I approach teaching or inclusion in my classroom or for my students on my caseload. The very essence of special education is that individualization piece. So the results of this action research can help to make decisions for each individual student on my caseload. And then these results can help inform our teaching on a more macro level and help shape or reform policy. Maybe the way that we're going about inclusion is spot on and we don't need to change anything. These results maybe just help to further demonstrate that what we're doing is working. Maybe the results mean that we need a complete overhaul. Or maybe the results demonstrate that we just need a bit of tweaking in our current policy. So I encourage you all to think about the questions that you might have in your classroom or the questions that you discuss in the break room, the teacher room, and to kind of see how action research can maybe answer those questions for you. And with that, over and out.